The studio was buzzing with anticipation. Ibrahim Traore, the young and bold leader of Burkina Faso, had agreed to sit down for an international interview. The journalist, known for his tough, often condescending style, clearly underestimated who he was facing. From the moment the cameras rolled, the questions were framed with bias, casting doubt on Africa's ability to rise without Western intervention. But Traore didn't flinch. He listened patiently, eyes steady, posture calm. When the journalist smugly asked, "Do you really think a small, poor nation like yours can stand without foreign aid?" the insult was barely disguised. For a moment, the room tensed, expecting a defensive reaction. Instead, what followed was a pause, and then a response that would ripple across the continent like thunder. Traore's voice was calm, but carried the weight of centuries. "Let me ask you," he began, "how does a continent rich in gold, uranium, oil, and the strongest youth population on Earth get labeled as poor?" The journalist blinked, not expecting a counter-question. "We are not poor," Traore continued. "We've been robbed. And every time we stand up, someone reminds us that we can't walk without their crutch." There was a noticeable shift in the studio. Staff members behind the camera stood still. The journalist tried to interrupt, but Traore held firm. "You speak of aid as generosity. I see it as interest-laden control. What we need is not charity. It's sovereignty." The words landed like hammer strikes, awakening a truth too often silenced in diplomatic settings. As the journalist stumbled to regain control, asking whether Burkina Faso could survive cutting ties with global powers, Traore leaned in, eyes sharp. "What power gives the world the right to decide which nations deserve independence? Was your country built by asking permission to grow?" The silence was deafening. "We have learned your systems. We speak your languages. We trade in your currencies, and still, we are not respected," he continued. "So maybe it's time we stop seeking validation and start building on our own terms." The camera zoomed slightly closer, capturing every nuance of his conviction. This wasn't political theater. It was the voice of an awakening continent, a moment of raw, unfiltered truth. Traore then shifted the narrative completely. "Africa doesn't need saviors," he said. "It needs partners who respect our voice, our soil, our people. And if we cannot find those partners, we will walk alone, proudly." The journalist sat frozen, scribbling notes he didn't know how to ask follow-up questions for. The audience at home wasn't just witnessing a standard interview. They were witnessing a leader reshape the conversation about power, dignity, and global hypocrisy. "You call us unstable," he said, "but who sells the weapons? Who sponsors the coups? Who dictates our elections?" With each question, his voice remained even, but his words grew sharper. It wasn't anger, it was clarity that couldn't be ignored. By now, the journalist's smirk had faded. He attempted one last challenge, suggesting that Traore's defiance would isolate his nation. "Then we will build unity within the continent," Traore replied. "Burkina Faso is not alone. Mali, Niger, Guinea, we are awake. And soon more will follow. The chains are breaking, not just in words, but in action." You could feel the energy shift, not just in the room, but in every African home that would later watch the clip. We are not anti-West. We are pro-African. There is a difference. One demands respect, the other demands permission. The crowd behind the cameras couldn't help but nod. It was no longer an interview. It was history being spoken. Traore went on to share his vision, a Burkina Faso where children are taught their own history before foreign history, where resources are refined locally, not shipped raw, and where leaders serve the people, not foreign banks. "When we rise," he said, "we rise with our feet on the ground, our eyes wide open, and our hands building, not begging." The passion in his voice was contagious. The journalist sat quiet now, absorbing words that echoed far beyond policy. These weren't campaign promises, they were declarations of purpose. A leader, not asking for a seat at the global table, but building one of his own, with room for all who respect true equality. The interviewer, trying to maintain control, said, "But don't you fear retaliation for such bold words?" Traore gave a brief smile. "Fear is a luxury for those who do not understand purpose. I'm not here for comfort. I'm here because my people deserve freedom, not 5 years from now, but now." His conviction was unshakable. "We've buried too many dreams under silence. Not anymore." The audience, watching online and in homes across Africa, would replay this moment over and over. A generation yearning for courage finally saw it, unfiltered, proud, and resolute. And from a man many underestimated, simply because he spoke with humility before thunder. The journalist finally fell silent, nodding slightly, perhaps realizing he'd been outclassed, not by aggression, but by truth. Traore ended with this: "Africa's time is not coming, it is here. The question is, will the world learn to listen, or will it force us to speak louder?" That was the final blow, not shouted, whispered like a storm about to arrive. The interview ended not with applause, but with a standing silence, the kind that comes when something undeniable is spoken. Traore rose, shook the journalist's hand, and walked off set, not with arrogance but with calm purpose. A leader who didn't just answer questions, he reshaped them. Within hours, the clip went viral. News outlets scrambled to subtitle and upload the footage. Social media erupted with support. "This is what leadership looks like," wrote one user. "A man speaking not just for Burkina Faso, but for all of us." Hashtags like Dr. Traore Speaks and Dar Africa Rising trended across platforms. Even critics were forced to admit Ibrahim Traore had just delivered one of the most powerful televised moments in modern African political history, not by yelling, not by attacking, but by standing tall with words that could not be denied. He had silenced arrogance, not with anger, but with ancestral truth. The world would come to remember that day, not for the arrogance of a journalist, but for the dignity of a young leader who spoke on behalf of generations. Ibrahim Traore didn't just answer questions. He sparked a revolution of thought. His words would be quoted in classrooms, articles, and speeches across the continent. For Africa, it wasn't just a viral clip. It was a signal flare. The old narrative was dying. A new one was being written, not by foreign hands, but by the very people who had long been denied their voice. And Traore, calm and clear, had made sure that voice was finally heard.